Welcome back, everyone. It is LaughNgamez here, and today we're back with another Starcraft 2 1 versus 1 replay. Today we have Ruff versus ViBE on the map Dusk Towers. So, spawning in the bottom right, we have Psystorm's Ruff, and spawning in the bottom left, we have ViBE. I believe ViBE is currently teamless, but he has been in the scene for a very long time. So, we have a Terran versus Zerg on one of the larger maps. It's probably one of the more, arguably, Terran-favored maps. Not necessarily Terran-favored, but Terrans are in no means afraid of this map. It's good for drops by all means. It's good for positioning play. It's good for macro for Terrans because it does have that pocket base. And the third base is quite easy to defend. So, we've got Ruff, who's a player who's known to be more aggressive, so he's opening up with a gas first here. Meanwhile, ViBE is just gone for a hatchery first, getting drones up, all that. Interestingly enough, he did go for the hatchery that is out at the third base, where that usually is. The more aggressive third this tends to be, so he could possibly be going for some sort of aggressive play, or maybe he's just got some reason to not want to take this natural. Liberators can tuck behind here very well. I guess it is easily droppable. Really, there's a few reasons to take this one, but most Zergs usually do take the pocket natural. Anyway, ViBE getting up his spawning pool, getting up his gas. Meanwhile, Ruff, with that early gas he got, is getting up a factory. So possibly for some Hellions or a quick Banshee, finish sealing off getting a solid wall off with that factory. So doesn't want any Zerglings or anything to get in here. And getting out just a Marine to deny Overlord scouts. And actually canceling the Marine here, interestingly enough. Ruff was going for a Marine to chase off any Overlords, but he's decided to go just for a reactor here. So this is likely going to be for a very quick Hellion run-by. That's the only thing I could think of this. And this is something that can catch Zerg off guard. And interestingly enough, the third position, ViBE expanding out here, will leave him vulnerable to Hellions at the start of the game, because they won't have to run in to the natural. They can just run into the natural at the front here. Now ViBE getting out some Zerglings, getting out Queens, starting up that Zergling speed, because he's going to want that map control. Meanwhile, Ruff, because he did go for the gas first, is getting a somewhat later command center here. But he is getting up his natural base, so it's not like this is a one base all-in or anything. Now, ViBE, on the other side of the map, getting up his third base here, which is in the back, so that's going to be very well defended and last later into the game here. And Ruff getting out these two Hellions, which are now moving across the map, but ViBE has seen these, and the Zerglings actually passed these two Hellions, so they're going in to get a scout. Ruff is not making any more Hellions here, just making one Marine actually, which is going to shoo off these one Zerglings, coming to repair this bunker, well, this supply depot, and the Marines will chase it off. Meanwhile, the Hellions on Ruff's side of the map are trying to get in, but they're going to be deflected here, so they're going to try to possibly pick off some drones and any Zerglings they can, but they're getting a great drone surround by ViBE here, so not a single drone went down for that damage, just a small amount of lost mining time, so a great defense by ViBE, who now feels safe enough to tech into this lair, which is likely going to be used for mutas on this bigger map. And now we actually have ViBE moving in with an Overlord that was rallied across, so this one Marine is likely going to pick it off, but he's getting a great scout for this. He's seen that there's no starport yet. Well, as far as he knows, there's no starport yet. And Ruff is actually going for a third command center, which ViBE saw. So ViBE knows the situation in this game. He knows there's going to be no large attack coming in, but this is so Ruff right here. Ruff is known to do crazy strats, and he's going for a three starport air attack, which is likely going to be for Banshees, but they are sort of more positioned on the outside, so they could be scouted by an Overlord here. But anyway, so this is going to be for lots of Banshees likely coming out of Ruff, maybe Liberators, but likely to be Banshees. But this is going to work out well for ViBE because he is getting the Spire, which is going to allow him to chase off any potential Banshees. And by the way, side note here, look at this Overlord spread from ViBE. Overlords here, like no drops could really get off on ViBE, but fortunately Ruff is not going for that. But he is going for these Banshees, which will be seen by these Overlords when the time comes. But once again, Spire coming out for ViBE. So these Banshees of Ruff are going to be shut down pretty hardcore. But now Ruff quickly floating over his third command center, only the 5-minute mark, and he's starting to secure that. with just a handful of Marines, getting out of mines, starting up a bunker so he is not going to die to any really Ling floods to the third base. He doesn't want to be forced to lift that off. Meanwhile, Ruff now is on 4 gases here because he's going to need all this gas to find enough gas for these Banshees here. 36 workers to 47. ViBE not getting a crazy economic lead here because he did go for that quick lair into Spire. So if he had just been playing, say, something like maybe Banelings for defense, he would have a very crazy economy, but these mutas are going to pay off dividends here when it does come to shutting down these Banshees that are moving out across the map now. And they're going to arrive right as these Mutalisks finish. ViBE does not have an Overseer yet, though. But speak of the devil, here comes one. So these Banshees are going to be completely deflected here by these 8 Mutalisks. Ruff is going to say, oh no, as they get scouted and completely driven off. Here come the Mutalisks, directly starting to pick up these Banshees. The Banshees are going to want to cloak and pull away, but cloak is not yet finished. Okay, here it comes. He can cloak now. Okay, so he's starting to pick off as many drones as he can here. Is Ruff, but once these Overseers catch up, that's lights out for these Banshees, or when their energy runs out. But it seems that Overseers are taking quite a while to get over here, so Ruff is actually picking up quite a few workers here. He has killed 12 workers, 13 workers, probably going to be more as he's just escaping from these slow Overseers. Ruff is actually getting so many drone kills here, for considering that ViBE had mutas out, and that was almost unacceptable damage for ViBE. Now, meanwhile, on Ruff's side of the map, he's using these 3 starports to continuously get out his anti-air. He's throwing up missile turrets, and these 2 mines here are actually doing damage to those Zerglings. They didn't actually kill off. They killed off 4 of the Lings, so that's a good number. Ruff lifting the supply depots as ViBE tries to go for a Zergling run by. And now, Ruff, as I was saying, Ruff getting out a bunch of Liberators to deal with these Mutalisks here. He's throwing up missile turrets, but really once he has out these 6 Liberators, he will be able to chase off these Mutalisks. So the Overseer ViBE does now have that Overseer speed, so they can move much quicker. So that if Ruff did go for more Banshees, they wouldn't be able to be chased off. So that Overseer allowing him to pick off those 2 mines, and now the Mutalisks are just reigning supreme. That is until these Liberators, now 6 of them, can really take on a large number of mutas here. So Ruff is in a good position here, actually. He did quite a bit of damage versus ViBE. ViBE now getting supply blocked as he loses that Overseer. However, ViBE getting up this 4th base creep spread is very important here. Wonderful. These tumors have been going across the map very quickly. It is a fairly low tumor amount for this creep spread. It's just ViBE's been doing it so consistently that it is moving across the map very quickly. Now these Mutalisks just patrolling, trying to make sure there's no damage done by ViBE. Now we actually see Corruptors coming out for ViBE. He's thinking, okay, Ruff is going to be committing to lots of Liberators here, so I'm going to need to deal with them. Okay, Corruptors will deal with 6 Liberators very easily. However, the question is, Ruff is getting out more Liberators, which eventually they'll reach this critical point, which they can really kill any amount of Corruptors or Banshees. And now 12 drones coming out of ViBE, so ViBE is saying, alright, well, I'm going to have to deal with this. I can't kill you right now, so I'll just keep you occupied with these Mutalisks here. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, I'll make tons of drones. I've got a 4th base. And Ruff is saying, alright, getting out a Fusion Core, likely going to be for Liberator range here. Getting out lots of Banshees. And this, oh no, my mistake. The Fusion Core was actually for this Banshee speed. So these Banshees, when they have the speed upgrade, they can actually outspeed Overseers. So when they're cloaked, they can still get lots of damage in here. So Ruff, once he does have this upgrade, the Banshees will be able to do damage again here. Now meanwhile, ViBE throwing up a 5th base here, getting out Infestors, Pathogen Glands, Air Carapace to not take as much damage and splash from these Liberators. So these Infestors are how Ruff is going to deal with this. Now Ruff actually, interestingly enough, getting a Raven. We've seen quite a few Terrans now. It's not uncommon for a Terran player to go for this sort of air style here, but Ravens are an interesting touch. Ruff is actually getting that. Nope, he's not getting any upgrades to benefit his Ravens right now, but these are likely going to be 4-point defense drones to fight off Corruptors here. But really what Ruff has to worry about right now is these Infestors, which one bad fungal and it's lights out for Ruff here. Now Ruff not throwing down a 4th command center yet, so he is going to eventually start to mine out here, but he will probably throw down one fairly quickly here. He's getting up all sorts of air upgrades. This hyper flight rotors is almost done for the Banshees, and now Ruff is starting to move out. The Ravens are actually giving him vision to pick off these creep tumors, yet he scans even though he has a Raven, interestingly enough. I guess just force of habits. Terrans aren't exactly used to having Ravens to pick up creep tumors. However, these Banshees are going to start pushing back this creep spread of ViBE, which has gone unopposed up until this point in the game. Now, however, I'm slightly worried for Ruff here because if a bad fungal growth does get off, and ViBE actually getting out Vipers, so Infestors, Vipers, lots of Corruptors is actually going to be so good for dealing with these. Now, Ruff actually going into the Banshees to try and pick off any of these Infestors, forcing them to expend fungal growth, and he actually manages to pick off about 3 of the Infestors and forces fungals out of them. So ViBE used to have 6 Infestors, now he's down to 3, which is good, but not as good as 6, that's for sure. Now Ruff coming into these Liberators, picking off every single Mutalisk there. These Banshees killing off every single Infestor, it seems. There's one left, and that one is going to be picked off. Now, the air damage being done by this Parasitic Bomb, Ruff did not manage to split, and Parasitic Bomb stacking does so much damage. So look at all these Liberators, all in the red here. So many weak Liberators, but they still have that same splash damage. And the point defense rune from the Raven being used to pick off a bunch of these Corruptors, because the point defense drone saved these low health Liberators, and now Vikings have been being produced by Ruff non-stop to deal with this, and it seems that he might almost just checkmate. He's even dropping mules. No, this is not VM here, it is to repair these Liberators, and this is such a high Viking count for Ruff here. Now Ruff losing these, Ruff down to only 2 Liberators to deal with these Corruptors, and ViBE has been making a lot of Corruptors here. So it's going to be up to these Vikings, which are honestly not the best versus these Corruptors, and we actually see 2 of these Vipers survive, so they're going to throw down Parasitic Bombs here, which is seemingly going to destroy all these Vikings. Vikings, as I said, not the best versus Corruptors. A defense, an automatic turret being thrown down, anything that Ruff can do to try and pick off this number of Corruptors, which is growing rapidly. Now, Ruff getting these upgrades for his Terran ships. So right now it's 1-1 air versus 1-1 no ground upgrades here. We've got air upgrades versus air upgrades. This is not something we usually see. Now, in the meantime, Ruff has gotten up a 4th command center. Meanwhile, ViBE not necessarily saturating and actually losing a few drones. So Ruff technically has more workers right now and is ahead on the economy. However, ViBE has gotten so many Corruptors here and actually picking off some Vikings, which were just moved back home, so the Corruptors sort of tagged them. Now we actually see a few Vikings over here on ViBE's side of the map that were doing some harassment. Ruff just landed these so the Corruptors couldn't attack them. However, more Mutas coming out for ViBE to deal with these. I guess he wants these Mutas to deal with any possible quick Banshees, maybe get some harass off, but it is a bit odd for ViBE to be making Mutas, which are so weak versus Liberators at this stage of the game. Now we actually see the Corruptors coming in to deal damage to the Planetary Fortress. The Vikings are going to come in to start picking off these, but Corruptors, once they're attacked, once their Caustic Spray starts to spin up, by all means, it really does tons of damage to this air, to buildings, and Ruff is losing all his air defense here. He's managed to build a few turrets underneath these Corruptors and Mutas, so he won't necessarily die right now, but his 4th command center did go down, and we're 13 minutes into a Legacy of the Void game. The main base is mined out. The natural hasn't been too heavily mined, so there's a bit left there, but the 3rd base has been heavily mined, so that is going to be running out soon here. So Ruff really needs to get up this 4th base, maybe even throw down a 5th soon, but really Ruff has so many minerals, so it's all about gas here right now. A 4K bank, which has just been dumped into a bunch of things here. Getting more upgrades, throwing up more command centers here. Plenty of supply depots. Ruff is really down in army supply right now, literally 17 army supply, but he does have Hellbats, which are great versus Zerglings, as ViBE is running in a bunch, but it seems ViBE is going to manage to force a cancel on this command center, picking off a bunch of SCVs. Ruff is not in a good position right now, losing these turrets, which are so critical for Ruff's defense here. Now Ruff does have 3 more command centers, so eventually he will be able to float another over. And it seems ViBE has just invested in these Zerglings, which was a great call. Now we actually see a lot of Broodlords coming out of ViBE. Now this is interesting, and this could be a common mistake that Zerg players make. ViBE had roughly 10 Corruptors, and he has turned every single one of them into Broodlords. Now, what does that leave him with? Very little anti-air here. And now Ruff is going to start building up his Liberator count. He's scanned these Broodlords. He sees, okay, such little anti-air, a few Mutas and some Vipers. All I need is air superiority to kill these Broodlords, and that's a possibility for Ruff to get. Ruff's scanning a bunch. He knows what's up right now, and he knows how to deal with this. Ruff making lots of Hellions. He's got plenty of minerals, so he's dumping them into them. Gonna try to get some counterattack damage done later, likely. And he's actually got these 3 command centers, so he's gonna be able to float over a 4th, maybe even a 5th later on. Now, a Zerg is burrowed by ViBE. That is cute to know exactly what situation Ruff is in, but however, we see 2 Hellions that must have run across the map and have now transformed into Hellbats to start picking off these bases of ViBE. More and more Hellbats moving across the map to try to get damage done. These Hellbats will soon have Infernal Pre-Igniters, so they will get that blue flame upgrade by all means. And but now these Broodlords are really the main point here to be made, as they are what could kill Ruff. Now we see a bunch of Zerglings coming in for ViBE, picking up, trying to do some damage here, but Ruff has so many Hellions, and Hellions absolutely destroy Zerglings. Ruff, moving over his 4th, getting a planetary up, so his economy is going to be getting back on track. This 5th base not landed because of that Zergling ViBE placed earlier. Ruff starting some turrets, so it will be able to be killed off here. And Ruff actually just scanning to get that. He lands the command center, and Ruff is actually in not a terrible position right now. ViBE has been throwing away a lot of resources, so Ruff has lost slightly more, but ViBE has had an economic lead in this game for quite a while. Now we see these Mutalisks provide that ViBE has oddly enough continued to make, even though Ruff is going into Liberators, which are so good versus them. But here come the Liberators, gonna try to pick off some of these Mutas. Picks off 2 of them, but Ruff did lose quite a few workers there. But then again, he's a Terran with 4 orbital commands, so he is going to be able to drop quite a few mules, quite a few scans. But now we actually see ViBE coming in for the kill move here. Ruff only 135 supply here versus Infestors, so much Parasitic Bomb and a bunch of Corruptors. Ruff is not in a good position here. Earlier on, ViBE did not have much anti-air, but he certainly realized that, okay, I'll get plenty of anti-air. Now what are you going to do versus Broodlords? Ruff, well, trying to do some counterattack damage with these Hellions, but really, that's just nothing. And now Ruff scanning, seeing exactly what ViBE has here. This Planetary Fortress buying as much time as it can. It eventually does go down. Now Ruff's got some Ravens here, which could either throw down some Seeker missiles and possibly get some good plays. So really it's up to Ruff's Liberator count here, which he has. 14 Liberators versus 6 Vipers, so Ruff lost his 4th command center, and now ViBE moving over to get his 5th base off, which is so important for Ruff. Ruff really cannot afford to lose this. And creep is actually being spread by ViBE in the front of Ruff's base. Ruff is going to see this and think, oh no, here. So Ruff gonna start losing this Planetary Fortress. It's losing health. It's half health now. It's gonna be going down, and Ruff is not really moving in to defend it. I mean, he's going in right now, but it's likely still gonna be picked off unless Ruff really repairs it. Anyway, Ruff going in for the big engagement. These Liberators coming in at such a good concave. Bungles going down, locking a bunch of these Liberators down as Parasitic Bombs rain on top of them. But still, the splash damage for these Liberators is great, and it seems that they're actually picking off quite a few of the Corruptors here, these point defense runs, keeping these Liberators alive long enough to get off this splash damage here. Now, we actually have a few, and now ViBE throwing down a bunch of infested Terrans to try and pick off as much as he can. Ruff does lose the command center though, and if Ruff wanted to make this hold, he needed to keep that, so Ruff is not in a good position. 50 army supply. Sure, he picked off a lot of the Corruptors for ViBE, but Ruff does not really have anything. He's scanning, seeing that there's Broodlords, a bunch. More Corruptors are on the way for ViBE, who ViBE is happily mining on, what, his 6th base here? Ruff only on 3 bases, which are now virtually all mined out, almost completely out of gas. He's floating over a command center, so he is going to start to be able to drop mules here, but it's the dream. This is a dream for Ruff. His creep is actually being spread absolutely everywhere. It's making its way into the 3rd base of Ruff. And at this point, Ruff is thinking, well, what can I do? I'm practically dead at this point. I may as well try to see what I can get done with these Vikings and Liberators, but they are going to pull back. And ViBE just sees absolutely everything. Look at this. ViBE can see from corner to corner of the map, basically. All corners except Ruff's base here. Now, ViBE not on the best economic situation, but is certainly a hell of a lot better than Ruff here, who is currently dealing with a queen planting creep on his base. And now these Mutas are coming and picking off these Hellions and gonna start to go to work on these SCVs for Ruff. Ruff losing what little glimmer of hope he had for his economy, and now the Vikings and Liberators are going to come in to shoo off these Mutalisks, which might even pick off his command center, and yes, that is going to go down, lifting it off, but Mutalisks can attack the air. And now it seems that Ruff has lost virtually everything. 8 workers here, 31 army supply, hardly any mining. Now Ruff, even not being very cost efficient here, as Sky Terran usually is, but it seems that he's actually played at a slight... So even though Ruff has been on a worse economy, he's managed to trade efficiently with all these air units, but really trading efficiently at the end of the day does not matter, as Ruff has actually been picking off lots of drones here. How many workers have been killed? Holy cow! 113 workers have been killed this game by Ruff, but ViBE has not really been pressured overall, so he's been able to remake these drones. But ViBE, Ruff certainly, that's one way to stay in a game like this, but I think it's too little too late here. Ruff actually killed off the space of ViBE, but Ruff hasn't even tried floating over another command center. He's just not mining at all. He's got 8 SCVs somewhere. Okay, they're all mining on his 3rd base here, but I think it's all ogre for Ruff. Anyway, Ruff getting out these Ravens here to try and maybe make some plays. Possibly going to move around the right. But ViBE once again going back into this such a strong composition for Zerg. But Ruff says, okay, that's it. I've dragged this game out long enough. GG. So ViBE takes the game here on Dusk Towers, going up against Ruff's interesting air style. But ultimately, Ruff, even though getting some amazing worker damage done, he just ended up not having a good enough economy to deal with this great composition that came out of ViBE. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. This has been another great Terran versus Zerg. It's always fun to see this classic matchup. If you guys have feedback, feel free to leave feedback, and you can always subscribe as I'm putting out these casts daily. So, see you guys next time.